I'm going to talk for 15 or 20 minutes and then hopefully have a conversation with you. So it doesn't have to be what I talk about, anything at all. I'm up and open to discussing. But in the wake of last night, one thing that takes my eye is that stunning banner there, "Lest we forget the frontier wars." Now, isn't it time that we had a memorial to the thousands of people killed in those wars? In Tasmania alone, on record, and there was so much that wasn't recorded, because the written record comes from one side of the wars only, and that is the British side of events, not the Aboriginal side of events. But it's documented that 1,000 Aborigines were shot. This is in Tasmania, or burnt, or otherwise put summarily to death. And in retaliation, 250 whites were speared or killed. It was a full-on war in the 1820s, yet our Prime Minister Howard said he's not going to allow black armband history. In other words, we must ignore it. The War Memorial says they will never have a Brendan Nelson, the Civil War that was here in Australia, on display there. So a bit later in my 8th decade, I'm going to be working hard to get up the start of having a memorial in or outside Canberra to the formative war of the modern nation of Australia. And it's not so much a thing for Aboriginal Australians as for the rest of us, because unless we face what happened right across this country, and to some degree is happening still, but it was a wave that engulfed the Aboriginal nations right across Australia. We're diminished people ourselves. I'm talking about white Australians or non-Aboriginal Australians. So it's a thing we need to do. Other countries do it. Germany looks back on the atrocities of the last war with a very open face, if you like. And many other countries do as well, but some don't. And Australia's one of those. And so there's a work which a lot of people will feel, oh no, we shouldn't be looking at that, we shouldn't be talking about. We are going to be so much better when we do, and it's part of our culture, and recognising our history is faced up to. So that banner is spot on, and I'm hoping to talk with the creator of that through Benita's good works, because it would be very good as a backdrop to the press conference to announce this process a little later this year.
Is that all right with you, Graham?
Thank you, Graham. Another immediate thing, that phone call that just took Paul out of the room, I'm trying to get the money together for a Trans-Tarkine walk. This is secret. So a 100-kilometre walk across the Tarkine wilderness in Tasmania, because after 30 or 40 years campaigning, Clayton here is just making sure that is on the record. After 30 or 40 years campaigning, it's in a worse situation. Now, this is a place judged by CNN. I don't know their judgmental validity, but to be the top of the 10 remote places on the world that's most desirable for Americans to go to. That's the Tarkine Wilderness in northwest Tasmania. It's nearly 500,000 hectares of the biggest temperate rainforest in the nation. It's got the cleanest air in the world. These are UN monitoring station outcomes blowing across that west coast of Tasmania. It has some of the richest Aboriginal living art sites on Earth, including hut sites, recorded in European times before that fatal decade of war that I just spoke about, with front porch, kitchen and living room. Still rock art sites on which thought maybe 6,000 years old, we don't know, and massive middens. These are kitchen sites, if you like, for the Aboriginal people, which these days are used as sporting venues for off-road vehicles, after the fateful 2011 decision by the then Labor Minister for the Environment in the Gillard government to ignore the 2 years determination by the National Heritage Council to have this whole area listed as National Heritage. We got Gallipoli listed, but this battlefield, if you like, this amazing wild country, he put that recommendation for listing in the waste paper basket, and the same week gave the go-ahead to the first mine. And 90% of the area is under mineral exploration for tin pot mines, literally, some iron ore and a bit of magnesite. Small mines that are have a very hard time competing on the global market anyway. And 6 coups of those rainforests, the first one to start after Easter, are on the immediate drawing board for logging. These are rainforest and eucalypt coups, and then firebombing. They drop napalm over the logged forest, what's left, to kill every fibre, fir, feather, flower left of those forests, because they don't want the native cotyledons, the seeds, the native plants regrowing to compete with their monoculture, exotic, introduced forest for the next round of plantation. Forestry Tasmania, by the way, sells Tasmania's trees to other industries, to other private companies to export overseas, so it gets free, the forest, it sells them to other people who make profit out of wood chipping them, and last year made a $43 million loss selling a product that cost it nothing. So the government in Tasmania has just given it $30 million to help cover that loss while it's closing hospital wards, can't pay for old people's facilities and the education system. Oh well, Machiavelli said, if you want to change the world, get ready to be crushed by those who have the money and the power now. And it's something we have to keep in mind. You only have to read the Daily Telegraph to see how that works, or the Australian, or much of the media, which is connected in with the circuit of dinners whereby ministers meet with lobbyists, that is the corporate sector, and that includes highly placed people in the media to chart the future of the country. I was asked this morning by a gentleman in this room, how come you're a bit upbeat about things? Well, it's because I choose to be. I think it's very important. I talk to young folk about protest, about things that are going wrong in the world, but as I said last night, our great advantage with the things that are going right on the world, because we're in the position to influence it using whatever skills we have. We don't know what the future of the planet's going to be. And you can't divorce Australia's future from, we're a fraction of 1% of the global population, this human herd of 7.3 billion people that's now overtaken the planet. Come on right through, don't worry about it. We're the biggest herd of mammals ever to graze on the planet, and we're using at the moment 120% of the Earth's living renewable resources. 120%. That's why forests are going backwards, fisheries are going backwards. I used to say just a few years ago, 70% of the Earth's fisheries are in collapse. It's now 90%. And for those who had a look at one of the papers this morning about the Great Barrier Reef, the Saturday paper, Mike Seckham has got an article in there just repeating something that most of us read and don't believe. 50% of the Great Barrier Reef is already destroyed. That's gone. It's the other 50% we're trying to hang on to. And Tony Abbott's Minister for the Environment, what's his name? Greg Hunt, the most powerful environmentalist in the country, got a fantastic accolade from the Prime Minister the other day. He said his Minister for the Environment is so good, he has already, just in less than 2 years, ticked off on $4 billion worth of developments. That includes coal mines, coal seam gas, coal ports and so on. Monty Python couldn't invent much of this stuff. But defiance, which comes with caring about the planet, and optimism is a very important word. Defying the circumstances that you see exist as far as global society and the planet is concerned. What we do know is that if we used our evolutionary or God-given intelligence, we 7.3 billion people, can live with this planet until we get over the population top apogee of somewhere about 10 billion people later, this planet, before it starts dropping. And it'll drop because poor people are lifted to the point where they can express their opportunity in life. And when women in particular, but men no less, get an education. And as I mentioned last night, we Australians, and I got some, not me, about this, so present company excluded, voted to take $4 billion out of foreign aid in the last, nothing was more prominent in the media than that in the last week of the last election campaign, which would, as Tim Costello estimated, cost 400,000 infant lives overseas, because we need more roads. That's where we're at. Now, I see all this, but I don't see and don't talk with Australians, let alone people overseas, who think different to that, but get corralled into voting the way we do by that Machiavellian connection of corporate sector, media in the surface of corporation. I mean, the Australian is a views paper. It is not a newspaper. We don't get the news, we get their views. We get the Rupert Murdoch, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, who said, "Don't let the bloody Greens near the economy," view of the world. Well, we have an intelligence to think about that and say, I don't want to be part of that system. And we all have a free vote in a democracy. Democracy is the best thing going for the planet. It should be a global governance with one person, one voice, one value, one planet. But I tried in the Senate to get Australia to promote a global parliament to look after such things as global finances, nuclear weapons, not the domestic things, but those things where we need a global governance. And it got voted down by every single person in the Senate, except the 2 Greens, and then later the 5 Greens who were in there. Every single Australian representative of democracy is opposed to democracy at its ultimate and essential outcome, which is global democracy. And we have to think ourselves, oh really, as somebody said to me crossing the floor, "Oh, don't you know how many Chinese there are? They might outvote us." Oh, well, I haven't met a Chinese or a Peruvian or a Nigerian or somebody from Niger who doesn't think the way I do. We do. We've got to get over this business of being alarmed that they might outvote us. When we see people around the planet as no better, no worse, but equivalent to ourselves, we'll be starting to get it right. It is another topic that is taboo in Australia. You must not discuss it. And if you do, it will not be reported. People say to me, "Why didn't you give this speech while you were in the Senate?" Well, I did, but nothing would clear the press gallery faster. And they'd all roll their eyes. If you get into saying, "Oh, so-and-so's a dirty, rotten cheat who's been caught out using a Commonwealth car the wrong way," whoa, you get, it's full. And you know why that is? Because that's what people like reading about. And I end on this point, because it's very, very important. I hear so much about what's wrong with politicians, what rotten politicians we've got. Well, as J.K. Galbraith, the great American economist, said, our politicians almost exactly reflect the people who vote for them. So my question is, as a voter, how can we point a finger at the politicians? As I said last night, 90% of Australians voted for 6. We saw that, and if you haven't been into the exhibition next door, there's the coal bag hanging to put a question mark in front of all of us. Will New South Wales today vote for more coal mines, actually more coal seam gas, a 4th coal terminal in Newcastle to make it back again as the world's biggest coal port? It's slipped into 2nd place. The answer is yes, overwhelmingly. People will vote for that in New South Wales today. And then they'll say, oh, I didn't know, or I was voting on the leadership, the person I like best as leader. Well, I ask about the future of the planet. Do you not vote for policy? We're all conditioned to vote for personality. Now, I know that's why I was never minister for anything. Just couldn't get enough votes. Stood for the wrong things. But I'm still very, very optimistic about the future because I see so many bright-eyed young people getting onto that footway at the start of life as I'm about to step off. And I think it's in good care. And part of my job as an older gentleman at this end of life is to imbue shortcuts for young people. Well, you will get depressed if you're intelligent. That's logical. But don't spend too long there. You're saddled with intelligence. So down in the dumps you get when you wake up and listen to that news every morning. But put the things you can't change on the shelf and get on with those things you can change and look after yourself. This is very important for anybody interested in protest or in changing the world. As Emma Goldman, some of you will have heard me say this before, the great American revolutionary getting women out of the sweatshops in Chicago in the 1890s said to the boys, I don't want your revolution if I can't dance. So don't worry too much about flying overseas with carbon dioxide going out the back of that plane. The main thing is that you campaign to change the world, which is headed for 100% solar-powered vehicles by the 2030s. That's where technology is taking us. There are absolutely stunning breakthroughs as well as dangers inherent in where we've got to as a human community. But we are a human community. We're all on Earth together. We can enjoy the joyride of the next 50 years because it's optimism that is going to make us succeed. Just like opening a sandwich shop is the Earth. If optimism drives our direction for the Earth's future, it can succeed. If we're pessimistic about it, it won't. Just the same as that sandwich shop. If you want to run your sandwich shop, opening one, be optimistic about it. You'll be there in 3 years' time. You won't be if you start pessimistic and think somebody's going to find a grub in the salad and that'll be the end of your shop. You can look at all the downsides, but there you are. So I'm very, very lucky. I'm full of beans. I'm very happy to be alive. I won't be for very much longer, but it doesn't matter, you see, because the same human dynamic keeps going. We're all just little cells in this moving dynamic of human life. It's fascinating to come into it and go out of it, but it doesn't end with us. It's just translated, and I'm enjoying having the most influence I can while it goes. And I thank Benita and all of you for asking me along this morning. There you go. My final message is quite empirical. Optimism is better than pessimism at any time.